Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Qur'an Speak.
Pleasure to be on.
Let's talk about Jonah,
Yes.
A prophet in both the Bible and the Qur'an. Tell me give me the rough outlines of his story.
So Jonah is sent to the people of Nineveh to preach to them, but he abandons the mission, and he joins some sailors. Eventually there is a storm. The sailors decide to throw him overboard. He is caught up in the body of a whale or a fish, and eventually he prays to God while he is there, and God then rescues him by having the fish vomit him out onto the shore. And there he would have been, while he's trying to recover, he would have been baked by the sun, but God protected him by causing a plant to grow over him to provide him shade. Eventually, according to the Qur'an, he goes back to the people of Nineveh, he preaches to them, and many of them listen to his message.
It's interesting that you talked about how he was sent to the people of Nineveh. I'm trying to think of another prophet that was sent to a people. My understanding is that prophets usually preach to their own people.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point. Actually, I hadn't thought about that before, but now that you ask it, it's an interesting point that he has been sent to a particular people. So why wasn't a prophet raised from among those people themselves? This I don't have the answer for.
So tell me about the Bible and the Quran. Do they differ on this story, or are they very similar?
They're very similar. Very similar. I've traced this broad outline, which is common to both the Bible and the Quran. There are some subtle differences in the Quran, as one Muslim writer pointed out. It says iltaqamahul hut. So this sea creature took him up in his mouth. This is how that translator would want to put it. It doesn't literally say that he swallowed him. So it could be that Jonah just remained in the mouth of the fish, and the reason why this comes up is that many people have found it difficult to think about Jonah being, in the belly of the whale and being preserved there. Of course, God can do everything, and anything that God decides to do, but does he do things which would go against what people perceive to be the laws of nature? And when something like this is being reported, that God did this or did that, and some people think, well, wait a minute, laws of nature do not permit that. It's not that God is unable to do that, but some people think that God does not violate the laws of nature.
I've read that some biblical scholars think that the story of Jonah, especially with relating to the fish, is a ahistorical fiction, perhaps, or even a parody. I've heard some people refer to it as a parody. Yes,
the book itself is difficult to interpret, and some people have taken these views that you mentioned.
Are there any Quranic scholars who have come to the same conclusions?
I am not aware of Quranic scholars who have taken that view. Mostly Quranic scholars tend to think that the stories which are depicted in the Quran are true stories. They happen like this. They're historical reminiscences that are given from the point of view of God in the Quran. I'm not saying it's impossible for a Muslim to arrive at such a view, but I have not seen it to be, at least not very common. And I'm not aware of anyone who has actually said it from among Muslim commentators. Nonetheless, the difficulties with the story are compounded with two views emerging as to the state of Jonah in the body of the whale. I kept saying whale or fish. So let me just say
like you haven't decided.
Well, because it's difficult to decide. We're talking about a story that happened, a couple of thousand years ago, and what exactly was this sea creature? Was it a whale or was it a fish? And obviously it can't be both, because the whale is not a fish. So let's say a whale, to keep it simple, right? We can imagine a huge animal as a whale, gulping Jonah. So now, did Jonah die in the body of the whale, or did he remain alive? So two views have emerged. Some said he remained alive, and some say he actually died there. And there are indications in the book of Jonah as well, because the terms used would indicate that this was almost like a submarine tomb for him. But whichever view, the difficulty for the modern mind is still that either he remained alive there in the body of the whale and refused to be digested, or that he died and then God resurrected him from the dead. In the New Testament, it is said that Jesus, on whom be peace, declared that he will give only one sign to his doubters. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the body of the earth, or in the belly of the earth, something to this effect. So what does it all mean? Does it mean that Jonah had remained alive, and Jesus also remained alive? Or does it mean that Jonah died and Jesus also died and therefore resurrected back from the dead? An interesting story nonetheless.
We're running out of time, but can you tell me what are the lessons to be gleaned from the story of Noah?
Well, of Jonah, rather.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So very simply, that God directs us to a certain task, and we should not give up on that task. Because we shouldn't see it from our perspective and think that it's not doable. Rather, of course, we should be circumspect, and we should go back to God and ask for guidance, but we shouldn't abandon our duties. So such dereliction of duty, as in the case of Jonah, should not be the option for the believer, but rather we persist, we persevere, and knowing that in the end, God will give us good results, as in the case of Jonah, we see the final good results.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.